What do you get when you combine a world-class EMS physician and medical director
I speak pretty good English for a guy from Detroit.
with an EMS veteran and all-around nice guy?
Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, my God.
Well, you get the EMS show. Taking it to the people, here's your host, Dr. Ritu Sani and Mike Vercast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the EMS show. Mike Vercast, Dr. Ritu Sani, and our special guest, let's see if I can get it right this time, George Hatch, who is the executive director for CoAEMSP. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Outstanding, Mike. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, good. Thank you for joining us, George.
All right. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having us or having me. And Ritu, it's great seeing you again.
It's wonderful to see you, George. I haven't seen you in
Days.
3 or 4 days.
Couple days. Yeah,
So.
exactly.
We just got done with our CoA board meeting, and so we got a chance to meet in Albuquerque. Great town.
Yep.
I got picked up at the airport by an Uber driver, and his name was Walter. And if anybody who's watching Breaking Bad,
Sure,
it's perfect that your Uber driver is named Walter. Unfortunately, he was
in New Mexico.
not a high school chemistry teacher.
Right, but you know, Ritu, the cast of Breaking Bad, as we were leaving, was going to be at the hotel where they were going to be having a party in the same spot upstairs in the restaurant bar area. Yeah, they had dedicated some statues in Old Town of the two main characters. And,
I saw that.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
So that was right after we left, though, right? I didn't see them.
Yep. No. I think they were coming in later that day.
My biggest question is, did any of you guys, because I was just at the store this morning, by the way, we'll come back to my
surroundings
domicile here in a minute here. But I was just at the store this morning and saw the Hatch chilies by the truckload being delivered. Did you get in on any of that action while you guys were there?
Yeah, I had some Hatch chili. I mean, it's got to be good, right?
That's their thing.
It's red or green, but yeah.
Exactly.
Hatch, New Mexico.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I had
anyway,
some green chilies on my hot dog one night at dinner.
Why not?
Yeah.
I think you can put that stuff on anything.
That's absolutely. It was good.
I mean, I think that's the idea, right? All right, let's just break this saga down real quick. As most of you guys know, we talked about it. Our last episode was old Mikey V and his wife were moving to Austin, Texas. Yeehaw, y'all.
Howdy,
and
y'all.
And so, yeah, howdy, y'all.
Howdy, y'all.
And anyway, so we closed on our house. We are like officially homeless. That's not true. We have somewhere. That's not very nice of me to say. We're not homeless. We just don't have an address exactly just yet. So, but anyway, we're at an Airbnb out in the country, and there's chickens literally feet from us right now. Chickens. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you're living in like one room, right?
Yeah, we have it's basically a big studio, but it's perfect. It's perfect for us. It's just Michelle and I, and we're chilling. And you might see my cat jump up here or walk in front of me because, again, there's no way to secure the manimal. That's okay.
Hey man, well, as my dad would say back in the day, with a name like Hatch and you got chickens there, it's got to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. And they bring us fresh eggs every morning.
Amen.
Oh,
the people, yes. And we had a fresh loaf of sourdough as well. So I'm telling you, great hosts. If you're ever coming to Oregon and you're up in this northern Willamette Valley and you need an Airbnb, reach out to me because these people will treat you right, and it is beautiful out here. I'm loving it. Anyway, I'm just glad all the packing is over with. We have packed 2 pods. We had to give our couch and love seat to the kids because turns out ain't gonna fit. It ain't gonna fit. We have more stuff than. I mean, we cut down on stuff and we still couldn't get the couches anyway. That's all. I'm just so done with it.
You couldn't get the couches in the pod?
No, dude. We had too much stuff. Well, first of all, the pod people screwed us. They said, well, how big is your house? And we're like, that's 2,000 square feet, blah, 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 whatever. And they're like, okay, well, 1 pod's probably good. I'm like, well, why would I not believe them? They're the people, right? This is their thing. So this thing shows up on the truck and I'm like, yeah, that ain't going to work. And sure enough, we had that thing filled up in probably the first, 3 hours, and we had to order up another one. So our bill went up. It's pretty affordable. It's about $8,000 for the whole thing, right? Like they drop it off, they pick it up, they deliver it to your new place. And we're actually paying people to come unload it because I ain't even going to touch that stuff again. I'm done. That was a whole thing. Anyway, sorry. It's just all but what's been on my mind.
Well, this is therapy too, right?
Oh yeah. You're letting me just get it out. So, all right. But I got a trivia question. Let's see if any of you two gentlemen can answer this. There is one physician, one medical director, one EMS physician who might have hair longer than he used to a couple years ago, but this is a trivia question. Who has served on the NAEMSP board, the NREMT board, and the CoA board? Do we know who might have had the triple crown?
The trifecta.
The trifecta. Oh, Dr. Sani, hi.
It's me.
I didn't see you there. So you're in a bit of a unique position to have a really good discussion today, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I can see. Yes. I mean, I understand to some degree what's going on.
Is there something going on?
Yeah, there is something going on, and we'll get into that.
Okay.
But I don't, George. I don't think there's anybody else. Is there? Doc.
No, I don't think so at all. You're talking about another organization that you've served with?
No, another doc that's been kind of on all three boards.
No, absolutely not. Not that I'm aware of, but
Yeah.
It's possible. I mean, it's possible. I'm thinking about like Norman McSwain, the late.
Yeah, he's
Dr.
never
Norman
was never
McSwain.
on the NAMSP board.
Right. Well, it wasn't around at that point, but I know that I'm pretty sure he served the registry board as the chair, and I'm pretty sure that he served as the JRC EMTP, which is the predecessor organization of us when this organization rebranded to the CoA back in the 90s. But I'm pretty sure he would have served too. I don't know who else.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, I think that, yeah, me. Woo.
Well, besides all that, how's Ratu doing?
Ratu's good. Like I said, just came back from Albuquerque, spent some time with George, doing some heavy lifting. That being on the board of the CoA is really kind of a lot of work, which he didn't ever tell me when he asked me to
I told you you're going to be one of the hardest working people in show business.
Yeah, it's work because the board does the accreditation work in a sense. I mean, people go and visit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
But board members review like all of the applications, and I actually escaped this last go around because they said it on a day I wasn't available. But when we're full steam running, it's a lot of work. So I think a lot of boards are about like, hey, we set policy of the organization, and then staff runs with it. This board is as George said, it's a working board. So it's a lot of work.
Absolutely.
And then there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Kind of because of this issue around accreditation and the registry that we're going to talk about a little bit. So, but things are going well, staying busy. August is a weird month because we cancel a bunch of our EMS meetings to summer, but I usually pick up a couple extra shifts because that happens. And so I'm still staying busy. Going to go visit the daughter up in Vancouver next couple of weeks.
Cool.
And then, you know what happens after that? Football season starts.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, baby.
Unbelievable.
And if you didn't listen to our last episode with Seth Fisher from MGO Blog, where we talked about how how sports use data for improvement and how you create a culture of quality improvement in a sports team and how that's directly applicable to EMS, I think this is a plug to go. We had a great time. We might have talked a little bit about Michigan football. But it was, I think it was really great. I think it was very applicable to stuff.
100%. Yeah.
Yep. So that's that summer's cruising along. It's hot as hell here.
So bad.
It was when we went to Albuquerque, it was 10 degrees cooler in New Mexico than it was in Oregon.
Yeah, there was a couple of days like that where it was hotter here than it was where I'm moving to.
Yeah.
That ain't normal.
Anyway, how are you, George?
Hey, Ritu, I'm good. It's been a busy couple of weeks. I live here on the lower Texas coast, or actually, I'm sorry, the upper Texas coast, closer to Louisiana, in Galveston, Texas, and it's sunny, warm, and for us, it's pretty hot. It's in the mid 90s here, and the humidity level is above 68, 70%. So we're in the dog days of summer and looking for some cooler weather, but no hurricanes, knock on wood.
No hurricanes.
So Galveston's cooler, right? Because it's right on the water. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we're right on West Galveston Bay, and if you go up the Interstate 45 to downtown Houston, it's about 35 to 45 miles, depending on where you're going, I guess. But yeah, it's a concrete city. If it's 94 degrees here, it's 104, 105 degrees there. So I'd say about an 8 to 10 degree difference in temperature.
Wow.
Definitely noticeable.
Yeah. I've never been there, but I've definitely seen, I've seen pictures of your house. You showed me that. I mean, it just looks gorgeous.
Well, thank you. I've grown up here, and I've traveled a bunch, but I haven't had to travel far. So I've pretty much spent my entire career right in this space, which is really, I'm blessed.
I used to be able to say the same thing until about 2 months ago.
Now, Mike, you're going to be going to Austin, which is a beautiful, beautiful city and live music capital of the world.
Yes, sir.
And you're going to run into, maybe you're going to run into Willie Nelson, who is a god there. Stevie Ray Vaughan was there. God rest his soul. But you got a lot of great music and a lot of great food and culture there in Austin. Keep it weird when you go. Okay.
I'm excited to get down there and give that a whirl. Like I'm ready. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, so you mentioned, George, that you've kind of worked your career in Galveston. I'm living down each other it's probably been 20 years, maybe even longer.
At least 20 years now. Yeah, it's probably over 20 years.
But when I first met you, you were not the CoA executive director. So, as an executive director of an organization, a lot of it is around like leadership and planning of how that organization runs. But you have a pretty solid background in education, Dr. Hatch.
Yes, well, thank you.
So, so you grew up in Galveston, then, George? Is that right?
Yeah, the community that I live in, Ritu, Mike, is a little waterfront community called Bio Vista. It's actually on the mainland side of Galveston, and we're a waterfront community. And both my parents, just to give you a history, both my parents were high school teachers. My dad was a high school coach, primarily basketball, but was also a football coach. So when you talk about football, hey, I'm right there with you. I love it. But growing up in Galveston, my dad always wanted to live on the water. And so when he was coaching, he also taught during the summertime. He taught every kid in Galveston that I know, even to this day, probably taught them swimming, driver's education, or health when they were in high school. And so he was teaching driver's education during the summer, and he would drive around different places and kind of scout things out and go, hey, man, I really want to, what about this? Well, he found this little community. There were it was a fishing community, maybe, 50, 100 full-time people lived out here. So we moved out here, and we were right on the water. And here's my story about how I got into EMS accidentally. Accidentally, one Sunday, my dad was painting our house. He was about 40 feet in the air on the top of a scaffold, on the top of an aluminum ladder. So you kind of see where this is going. Yeah. This is like 1973. I'm about to start my freshman year in high school. And we hear this loud ruckus. We run downstairs, and my dad has fallen 40 plus feet from the peak of our roof where he was scraping the paint to finish it, and fell to the ground. And the only thing that broke his fall was my grandmother's car. And I got to tell you, I'd never seen anything like that. There happened to be a dentist and his wife motoring by on their boat on a Sunday morning.
Oh, geez.
And Yeah, and our next door neighbor, who was a police officer from Houston, who was down for the weekend, were both attending to my dad. So think back on this for those of you that have been in EMS for any length of time. In 1973, the people that came to pick you up were funeral home, high top suburban
Yeah.
from the local funeral home that showed up. And the two guys that jumped out looked to me like they were about 16, 17 years old. They bundled him up, put him on a stretcher, and then moved really quickly with my mom to the hospital. And they took him to a little local community county hospital here. And by the time I was able to gather up my sister and my younger brother and get to the hospital, they had already transported him to the University Hospital in Galveston. So we have the oldest medical school in Texas here in Galveston. It's a level 1, and I didn't know any of that stuff back then. But my dad survived. Was 18 days in a coma, had a flailed chest, he had a basilar skull fracture. He fractured pelvis. He was in bad shape, and likely would have died. So I tell people this, or actually he told people this: if he'd have fallen on his ass, he probably would have died, but he fell on his head and he survived. So that was my intro into the EMS system, and I took a lot of water safety courses, living around the water, grew up on the water, very active swimming. And so I became a lifeguard out on the beach, best job I ever had, with the Galveston Police Department. And I went to EMT school in my senior year of high school, graduated, did a year at community college here, decided I didn't want to be in college. And so the local EMS system in Galveston had stood up an EMS system, and I was lucky enough to get hired, working for a private ambulance company, toting stretchers and learning the business. And I went in the second paramedic school that UTMB taught at the medical school, graduated from there in 1979, worked for the city for a couple of years, and I had an opportunity to go to Houston and teach in the community college. I didn't know that I was going to be a school teacher, and somebody saw something in me that I didn't see. Didn't have a college degree, just had a lot of experience in a very, very busy EMS system, where we had a lot of physician oversight and involvement and nurturing. And so I spent 25 years in Houston at the Houston Community College, and we had a contract with the City of Houston Fire Department. We did all of the education and CE for their 3,500 members. So it was quite the education about education. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I didn't know, all the years we've known, I've never heard the story about your father.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. I knew the
Yeah.
stuff, of course, about you being in Houston for that length of time.
Yeah.
And then you went back to school various points, right?
Yeah, I went. I was at the college for a couple of years, and we were on the continuing education side of the house because a lot of paramedic programs and EMS programs, when they first originated, lived on the CE side of stuff. There was no college credit really for paramedics or EMTs, so we were teaching this course. The fire department, had us contracted to do it. But one of the things that I learned at the college early on was, as the college was growing and their institutional accreditor, that's in our part of the world called SACS, that's the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. SACS has oversight of community colleges, technical colleges, junior colleges, and universities in a very wide range, like multiple states, probably 8 or 10 states. And so one of the things that SACS every 10 years does is they come back and they visit the institution. And so the institution is looking at things and they're saying, how can we improve? What do we have to do to improve? And one of those things was people in technical areas like EMS that didn't have a college degree were going to have to go back and get a college degree or find another job. So I already had a year of coursework under my belt. I started going back, taking some classes there at nights, weekends, and I finished my associate's degree, and I recognized real quickly I wanted to go ahead and get my bachelor's degree. So the University of Houston is it's a tier 1 university now. It's maybe not as famous as the University of Michigan, where my good friend Ritu goes. And we don't have as solid a football team, but we're working on it, right? Got a great basketball team now. We got a great basketball team. Phi
Well,
Slam
especially
Jammer.
last couple of years, for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I went back to the University of Houston. It's a commuter school, and I went back, and over the next 12 years, I got my bachelor's degree. I got a master's degree in education, and I finished my doctorate in education with a specific slant or focus in teaching. So that's been my focus during that time, and I was able to take that and apply that to what it is that I'm doing. We had a very active and engaged professor that was my dissertation professor, and had a lot of oversight, and we really focused a lot on what we were learning about active learning and teaching, and the affective domain in particular, and trying to apply that to the classes that we were teaching. So I do believe that a lot of the paramedics and the EMTs that were impacting patient care in the city of Houston were impacted by that work that we did. So it was pretty interesting.
Cool. Good stuff. So then you're hitting 15 years with CoA, right?
Yeah, I just started my 16th year.
Yeah. So when does that be? I remember when you made that change, and that was a big deal. That was like not a minor decision. I mean, you were leaving something that you had built that was great to something that needed a little bit of work.
Yeah, Ritu. Nobody tells you what's going on behind the curtain until you get there. There were definitely issues that were going on here. They had change in leadership, and they were floundering a little bit. I didn't really realize that. So when you look at it from the outside, they were having difficulty. But we had a very supportive board. When I came in, and they said, "Hey, you're going to have to move these programs towards gaining national accreditation because of this effort that's going on nationally." I was familiar with it. I was not intimately involved with it, but I certainly knew about it. And we went from a situation where we had voluntary accreditation in many areas of the country. There were about 14 states that required it, but the vast majority of states did not require that. And so when the registry, after a lot of national debate and a lot of national discussion, and all the key stakeholders were involved in this, when they decided that they were ready to move forward with this, they set a target date 5 years out from that, and they said, by this date, January 1 of 2013, you're going to have to be either accredited, or you're going to have to be in the process of gaining accreditation. So we had to develop a process for gaining accreditation. But when that date came, we went from having about 220 programs. Overnight, we had another at least 200 programs that were going to try to move through this process, and it was actually monumental. I'm really proud of the work that we've done over these 16 years. It's certainly not me. I've got a great team of folks that I get to work with, and a very supportive board. You're one of those board members that the actual amount of work has ramped up. But we've gone from, let's just say, 220 programs to over 700 programs that we have on our system. That's a testament to how much difference I think that decision by so many key stakeholders back in the day. That's a decision that really has moved the needle.
So go ahead, Mike. Were you?
No. I'm learning and listening. I love it.
Yeah. Before we get more into that issue, because something's popped around recently, but I think a lot of people, whether you're a medical director of a fire department or ambulance agency, somebody who's been a paramedic functioning out for 10 years or 5 years or 15 years, or somebody who wants to get into EMS and is trying to look at EMS schools, I don't think people really understand what is this thing. What is accreditation? What is it? I mean, is it? Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
well,
I can. Sorry, I was going to say, like, for myself, right? Because I think people have probably heard of CAS accreditation, or they probably heard of organizational like accreditation, whether it's on the air medical transport side, ground ambulance, whatever it's going to be. Like that's what I was familiar with, right? And so when I would hit the road with Flight Bridge Ed, I would teach. There's a little piece in there that talks a little bit about accreditation, right, and why it's important, and things like that. And I always started off that lecture with just kind of talking to the people, like, what do you know about accreditation? Why do these organizations go through the effort and the expense to do this when they don't always have to? Right now, sometimes it's written in that they got to be accredited, things like that. But most of the time, they're just sort of doing it because they feel like it's going to make them better. I would imagine that's kind of the same thing on this educational side, right?
Definitely. I actually would go back to the early 1900s to talk a little bit about accreditation and what sort of, if it will, why it matters. Ritu is a physician, and one of the things that happened back in the day, back in the early 1900s, is medical education for physicians was sort of all over the board. They were coming from the English or the British model of medical education, and so when folks in America, in North America particularly, were doing medical education, there was not a lot of standardization. So the Carnegies had a lot of money, right? And I recall that they engaged an expert, named Flexner.
Flexner.
And
the Flexner report.
The Flexner report. Basically, Flexner went and looked at medical education in North America, and what he came away with in that Flexner report, and again, this is my recollection, was that medical education was just sort of all over the board. It was not standardized. We had to have something different. And what happened in the U.S. is a lot of kind of fly-by-night places closed, and those medical schools had to get better. Right. And so the ones that were able to follow that pathway forward are the same medical schools that are teaching medical education today to the current physicians and the future physicians that are going to practice. So I think that's kind of the context of why accreditation makes a difference. I mean, in the highest level of medical education, you have to have accreditation. Ritu, you graduated from an accredited medical school. You graduated from an accredited residency program.
Yep.
So those accreditors basically are saying that your degree, your certification that comes from attending that medical school and that residency or that fellowship has value. It has portability. It has transferability. It really means that if you're going to work anywhere in the U.S., right, that you have to be recognized by your peers in order to practice, and that's the guarantee of the education that you receive, that it does have value. So to kind of take that down to the educational level for what we're doing, if I'm coming from a community college, a technical college, a university, I mentioned someone like SACS. That's the institutional accreditor in our part of the world, but there are probably 5 or 6 of the national accreditors, or they used to be called regional accreditors. But those national accreditors, have a particular area of the country, and all of the colleges and universities in their particular scope have to meet standards for gaining, and then maintaining their institutional accreditation. What we're talking about here for us is really programmatic. So paramedic, we have paramedic programmatic accreditation, but nursing has that for their particular profession. Engineers have that, but if you stick with just medicine, if you look at any medical specialty is going to have a programmatic accreditor that really has some oversight.
Okay. Hold on a sec. My wheels are starting to spin, and I'm going to make us way out of order here. But I feel like in this current situation here, okay, I'm hearing from George, who I'm feeling pretty comfortable knows what he's talking about a little bit here.
I'm glad you think so, Mike. Tell my mom, will you?
So Yeah. So I'm hearing out of one side of people's mouths, we want to be at the healthcare table. We want to be recognized and blah, blah, blah. Now I'm hearing that one way you can do that is that you come from an accredited program or you have accredited programs, and those same people that want to have the seat are fighting against the accreditation. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, again, I know we're a little early in the situation here, but that just occurred to me knowing now kind of what I've been learning from George. So that is quite the juxtaposition to be in. And quite frankly, it's just another episode of seemingly EMS doesn't know what the hell they want or how they want to get it. Okay, there. I just said my little thing. Now we can carry on. But like, am I like too far off base here with two?
No, I think you're spot on, and I think that, you know, and I'm a little bit biased, right? I'm not only am I on the board of the COA, but I've over the 25 years that I've been involved in EMS, I've been involved in a lot of these projects that developed this pathway. Or as NAMSP president, you know, really pushed harder to support this. But that's exactly right. You know, we think our paramedics should be paid more. We think that they should, you know, they should be allowed to do more. We think they should be better organized. We think that mobile integrated healthcare is just as good as this and that. That's all great, but you need to then step up to the plate and show that you're part of you're undergoing the same standards that everybody else in the healthcare system does. And that's the other piece. The other way I look at it, because the argument I think that's made is that accreditation is expensive. Accreditation is it's just, you know, a bunch of check boxes. It's too much, this and that. And then we hear this, which I think is pretty false argument. Well, there's this shortage of paramedics.
Right.
There is definitely a shortage, but
this ain't the reason.
This ain't the reason. But we get this a lot, right? Well, we don't have enough paramedics in this place, so let's make it easier to become a paramedic.
Which I mean, I agree, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Right. But so here's the thing. So if your hospital doesn't have a neurosurgeon, do you just want to make it easier to become a neurosurgeon? To get your neurosurgeon?
Okay.
It's only brain surgery.
I think, I mean, it's, you know, it's not brain surgery. I get it. I think to become a entry level paramedic, it requires a certain amount of education, certain amount of training, certain amount of experience. And nobody goes into the development of things like the national education standards, or what was previously called the standard curriculum, the instructional guidelines. Nobody goes into any of these things and says, we need to make this crap as long as possible. We need to stretch this out.
Let's milk this baby.
Everybody wants it to take the right amount of time. And so this idea that, you know, well, we can shorten it or get rid of this and that and make it easier, there's a false equivalency. You're not going to end up with a person who's well trained. The other piece too is, you know, I mean, the one fundamental thing that I think George didn't mention, I mean, I think he hit the nail on the head, of course, because he knows a lot more about education and accreditation than I ever will. But if you're like 19 and you want to go to paramedic school, think back when you went to paramedic school. Did you know like what questions to ask to ensure you were going to get a good education?
No clue.
And so you're asking people who are, and in the previous world, you could have, you know, the University of Pittsburgh paramedic program, and you could have George and Ritu's most excellent pickup truck paramedic adventure.
Hey, that was going to be our name for our school.
That's true. Well, I kind of use it. Ritu, Mike, and George's.
Okay. All right. Fine. Now we have a doctor of education. So
there you go. That's right.
I can write yours. I can only write your prescription, Mike, that says you got to study harder. That's it.
Perfect.
I mean, that's.
And you know, maybe the University of Pittsburgh costs, I'm making numbers up, you know, maybe that costs $15,000, and Ritu and Mike and George will do it for $29.95, and we'll throw in a
Free raptor shears.
Yes, exactly. Free shears, free trauma shears. Um, the you don't know what to ask. You need to in are you really going to be able to know that at the end of Ratu and Mike and George's most excellent paramedic program that you are actually trained and prepared in how to be a paramedic?
Oh, but isn't that what the National Registry is for?
Oh,
Aren't they the ones that they're yep.
yeah.
Nope. So who cares if I come from Mike and George and Ratu's most excellent paramedic school, or I come from the University of Pittsburgh paramedic program?
Yeah. That's a great point. One of the things that I think is really important to understand is that national certification or a certifying body, which is what the registry does, that it's not just that to become certified, to become competent in this profession, you have to be properly trained, right? And what the certification exam does is it takes an individual who's received the proper training and education and validates that on the day they showed up to take that test that they perform about at least as well as the minimum that we want somebody to perform. All right, so it's not just the test that matters. It's not just your destination that matters. The journey is as equally important as the actual destination. And we fought this battle in emergency medicine and EMS physicians forever. When you start a new specialty like EMS, there's no accredited programs, right? Because it wasn't a specialty. So for the first few years or 5, you take these people like myself who have all this experience and say, we're going to let your experience ride as the starting point. But you, as the leaders, need to create the education program that's going to train these people. And it was the same thing in emergency medicine. And at the end of the day, I can't, as we have transitioned away from like the first group of people who got board certified in EMS, you can no longer sit for an EMS board unless you have been trained at an accredited fellowship, because the journey is equally or more important than the day that you take the test. And so, I think there are probably definitely people out there that could spend a month studying a textbook and pass the registry exam. There are also people who, for whatever reason, spend years studying and can't ever pass it. And I get that too. But I know there are people that could study study like one of the textbooks and pass a registry exam, which is in. So that is why this idea that just passing the test is all you need doesn't hold any water from a standard when you look at other professions. Any profession that has certification as part of its standard also has accreditation built in, because the journey is as important or even more important than the actual examination.
Agreed.
Did I hit that right, George? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that speaking as somebody who's been in EMS, I'm a lifer, probably like both of you guys. I mean, honestly, in the business, I graduated from a program that wasn't accredited, but the medical school and all of the faculty, the attending faculty at the university were the folks that were teaching us. I went through a 400-hour or 500-hour paramedic program in 1978, 1979. We in 1978 anymore. We're in 2022, and most of these programs are in excess of 1,000 hours. And here we are. We're fond of talking about how many clock hours something is, but really, it's what are you doing in those lines between the clock hours that you're attending that 1,000-hour program? Are you getting all of the experiences that you need? Are you going to see all the types of patients and the different settings that you need to see in order to really be a competent entry-level person. I'm just going to tell you from my experience when I went through, I didn't see enough. I didn't see enough people. I went through. We were, the second class of folks that were taught, and they put us out there and said, "Hey, you're in charge." And well, I wasn't in charge immediately, but you kind of get the idea that that's what it was. And today, I think there's a little bit. I'd like to believe anyway that there's a lot more rigor than there was before. You've got people that are professional educators from EMS. Ritu, you kind of mentioned it with you being one of those pioneers that they said, "Hey, your experience is going to count for something while we're moving forward." We didn't have professional paramedic educators that were educating us back in the day. It were people like you, Ritu, physicians that were, that had an interest in making sure things were going to be okay. So I do believe that having professional educators and having standards that we're having to follow now educationally are really important. And those were all things that somebody smarter than me with a vision, more than 20 years ago, sat down and said, "This is maybe the way forward." And they got buy-in on that. That's the other part of this. This is not made in a vacuum, right? This really was a conversation that people had what was going on. So
there's going to probably be a group of people, just because just like everyone here knows EMS people, and we're all EMS people, that this is just a money grab. They don't want to lose the money for these people to have their accreditation. They just want to, they're just worried about not losing any money. What do you say to those people? I mean, to me, it's kind of it makes zero sense, but I know how people think, right? They're going to say, "Oh, they're just pushing for accreditation because that's a revenue stream for them."
Well, I mean, there's no doubt there are costs associated with the accreditation process,
for
right?
sure.
And I think that's in everything that we do. I mean, I don't like
100%.
paying more for my light bill. I don't like paying more for my light bill, but right now it's pretty hot outside. And you got to have light and air conditioning. So, we're nobody wants to pay for really more of something that they don't think is of value. And so again, I think that's incumbent upon us as an accreditor, not just in EMS, but in all of accreditation. We have to show and demonstrate what's the value. What is the value of accreditation? And again, I think, we've got 760 different programs that are all meeting a single standard. But Mike, I'm not benchmarking your program against Ritu's or Ritu's against mine. I'm only benchmarking, or CAHEP is really only benchmarking your program against the standard. So whether you're a fire-based program, whether you're a community college, whether you're a private school, whether you're a hospital-based program, if you're one of the two military programs that we have, the Joint Special Operators at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then the schoolhouse at Fort Sam Houston, the federal level of that, we've got schools in all of those different areas and then some. So I think there's a lot of different ways that educational programs, paramedic educational programs, can meet the standard. But it also is really about looking at resources. So the cost, yes, there's a cost that they have to pay to submit themselves to this. There's an annual fee of $1,700 that they do submit once a year. And then every 5 years, you write another self-study. You have an actual site visit where generally 2 people come for 2 days and they look at everything and they interview everyone and they say, here's what we're reporting back to the COA. And then there's a lot of due process steps between there and after that. But at the end of the day, it's really looking to see, do you meet the standard in each of those areas? That's really what it's about. And I don't know what the calculation is. We did this many, many years ago. The cost always seems to come up. I would just tell you, I think, you're really not talking about heavy costs on the part of the COA.
Yeah.
But if there's a resource cost back at the schoolhouse, who's looking at that? Who otherwise would be looking at that and say, Ritu, you're in a classroom where you don't have good lighting. There's not an internet connection that's stable. What about the medical director? Should she or he be compensated for any of the time that they put into working with the students, reviewing the materials, actively engaging in the educational process? I mean, how does that work? Those are resource questions. And that's one of the things I believe that accreditation does. It looks at the standards, but it also uses those standards to try to help leverage the resources that you're going to need to deliver better education. And the student, like you said, both of you guys said that, they're not going to know what they don't know. They're just there trying to get through it.
Yeah. And, I mean, other, does a student get experience in pediatrics? That's been a big focus of COA for a long time, partly because we had a pediatrician as a chair. For the board
but the American Academy of Pediatrics is one of those physician groups that sits on our board, just like CoAEMSP. And what the standard says, what we're asking people to do based on the AAP, and this has been some years back too. So this, even when I was still teaching, the AAP was trying to make sure that medical students, nursing students, paramedic students, people in all the different specialties at least had some integration with children. So we're asking in those 6 different subcategories of pediatric patients that the paramedic students see at least 2 of them, 2 people, two children in each of those categories. We're not asking them to go to a children's hospital. We're saying maybe you could do that in a pediatrician's office. Maybe you could do that with a local school nurse. It's not ideal, but not everybody's going to have, like I did, Texas Children's Hospital that's in your backyard in Houston, where I got to send my paramedic students to.
Yeah. I think that's the other piece is like, you can look at this as an unnecessary or a burden, or you can look at it as protection. And, it protects the students, it protects our patients. And, I've, as a board member, I'm not a site visitor, although I've done, one site visit at least, and talked to program directors at our conference, Accreditation. And as a program director, we meet there's a lot of turnover, but doing an EMS program correctly requires resources. And I think a lot of program directors would, if it weren't for accreditation, would be stuck going, I have no idea how to do this or what I need. And talking to a lot of them, they said, this framework, and let's be clear, accreditation is not meant to be like I'm accredited, so I'm the bee's knees of paramedic school. In fact, it's meant to be the just like NREMT, it is meant to be the minimum requirements you need to put together a paramedic program that trains competent paramedics.
Yeah.
But the program director looks at the structure and is able to go to their school's dean and leadership. And let me tell you, the dean understands accreditation. If you're a dean and don't know what accreditation is, then you're not in the education sphere. And in fact, I've talked to program directors who they were new and they went to their dean, and their dean was like, yeah, we were wondering when you were going to come to us about this accreditation stuff, because every program we have is accredited. And but they then like, this is the list of resources we need to do this correctly. And I think some of the challenges sometimes folks have as well is this list of resources. I said dean. Does that mean that only a school like a can do this? And you mentioned it already. The answer to that is no. We have hospital-based programs and we have big fire academy programs. Can a one-person school do this? Probably not. But it's expensive to train people to, I don't know, go into somebody's house and save their lives.
Weird.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask this. And again, I as usual, we are a super organized podcast with pages of notes and just unbelievable resources to get this stuff out. But
very well scripted.
Yeah, it's very well scripted. So the question may be out of place again, kind of like the earlier one. But so, I mean, I hear all these things. But and I'll ask Ritu this, and then George, feel free to chime in. And again, this might be weird since you're the executive director and Ritu's on the board, but so what is going to be the potential fallout from this if, Mike and Ritu's most excellent paramedic school doesn't have to be accredited and we can just start pumping out these paramedic babies? What are some of the unintended consequences and how will we know?
Well, before we do that, keep that
Okay.
question.
Okay.
I'm not sure everybody who listens to us knows the issue that's going on
Oh,
today.
okay. Fine. Fair enough.
Yeah. So, George, so what is the specific kind of issue that has popped up that's led to some pretty passionate, like, editorials in various places and a little bit of chest thumping here and there? And so what specifically has gone on that's like brought this issue up as a bigger issue?
Yeah, I think great question too. Probably about I don't know. The conversation sounds like it's been going on for some time. I mean, we've known a little bit about things that are going on, but frankly, about 6-8 weeks ago, we met with some elements of the National Registry, their executive committee and their senior staff, and there was concern that some states, Michigan in particular, had introduced a bill to do away with the National Registry exam, as well as do away with the requirement for CAHEP accreditation. And then Pennsylvania, along with another 1 or 2 states that I'm aware of, had indicated, look, we've got to do something. We've got a crisis out here. We need more people. And is there another way forward? And so the National Registry, their board looked at this, and they came out with a draft resolution that said that they were going to offer, if you will, a third option. You could be CAHEP accredited. You could have a letter of review from the Committee on Accreditation, us basically, to allow them to provisionally operate while they're going through the CAHEP process. Or number 3, you could have a state approval process, and that would be enough for students to go forward in paramedic programs in the future. Again, I'm not speaking for the National Registry. I don't know what their the conversations were, but I think it's fair to say that they were getting some pushback, and they made the decision globally. And the next week they went to the National Association of State EMS Officials, where they kind of ran into a little bit of a sharp response. I don't know that they were anticipating, but there were a lot of state directors there at that meeting that indicated, we're not happy with this, and that we are not looking to have graduates come from non-accredited programs. If you want to have them in your state, I guess that's okay. But the essence, I think, what I took away was, we don't want them coming to our state. So if they're always and forever, they're going to stay in Michigan where you're from, then maybe that's good and they're okay. But I think what graduating from a nationally accredited program that has given you the opportunity to take the national certification exam is portability. So Mike, when you move from Oregon, soon, and you move to the Republic of Texas here, you're going to have portability, right? So that student that goes through a program who's 19 years old, who may not understand what accreditation is or why that's important, and they take the registry exam, or maybe don't get an opportunity to take the registry exam, has a change in life, right? They move, they get married, they move across the country, they get to Texas, let's say, and then they find out, hey, you can't work here because you're not able to be recognized because you didn't come through a school that was accredited and you didn't take the national registry exam. So that's the unintended consequence. I'll tell you a quick story that ties into this. I had a young man contact me about 3 weeks ago. He was from Florida. He had graduated from a non-accredited school, and he had gotten a job with one of the local groups in his part of Florida, and they told him, you've got to be nationally registered. Well, he was not able to take the national registry exam because he graduated recently from a non-accredited school, and so he can't be employed there, short of repeating an entire paramedic exam, or course, I should say, or finding somebody that's willing to take him in and kind of work with him, I guess, sign him off, but through an advanced placement pathway. But that's that would be the exception rather than the rule. So this kid learned a very, very valuable lesson in a three-way conversation where he had a local program director from a local community college that told him, we can't do what you're asking us to do. And so that's a really sad conversation, I got to tell you guys, to have with somebody brand new in the business. This kid didn't know what he didn't know, and now he's going to have to live with the consequences of coming through a program and never really being able to move outside of the state of Florida and go to work. So that's a real consequence, Mike. I think that's a really great question, and that's when you get right down to the nitty gritty. That's what's going on with something like that. I don't know that that's the only thing, but that's a pretty important thing.
And I think so again, well, the solution that some people might throw out there is, well, then just don't require accreditation.
Sure.
But you know, I think there's one falsehood. This idea that accreditation is the barrier to there being bajillion thousand million paramedics out there. That like tomorrow, if we just get rid of accreditation, we will no longer have some kind of shortage. And that's just not true. You know, the shortage or the difficulty we're hiring paramedics right now is the exact same difficulty my hospital has in hiring nurses, that we have in finding. Let me just give you an example. My group, they, you know, usually when somebody wants to trade out of a shift, it used to be really easy to trade out of a shift. Now it's really hard. There's no, like, people are not like, I'm going to be a jerk about it. It's just that the healthcare community is really tired, and picking up extra time or extra shifts, it's just not happening. The other piece is there's a workforce shortage everywhere. You know, the McDonald's near my house, where I used to sneak a Big Mac when I worked till 3 a.m.
Yeah.
They were still open. Had to go back. They had to close. They had to knock 12 hours off their day because they don't have enough staff.
Yeah.
You know, the other day we went to, you know, I had a patient come to me because they went to their dialysis center and there was a handwritten note. We are short staffed at the dialysis center. No dialysis today. So, you know, because who needs dialysis?
Right.
And so this idea that accreditation is the stumbling block that I think is really a false equivalency. And I think that some folks that for whatever reason have had a bee in their bonnet about accreditation are trying to use this as to their advantage to do that. You know, emergency medicine as a resident. So emergency medicine has always been one of the sort of middle to upper most competitive residencies in the medical sphere. When people apply for residency, emergency medicine didn't fill this year as an entire specialty.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
There were fewer applicants than there were spaces in emergency medicine training this year.
Wow.
And that's because who wants to do this? I mean, the last 2.5 years, I mean, you listen to us. All we talk about how tired we are. And so this crisis extends out there. And I'll go back to if I don't have a neurosurgeon at my hospital, I'm not just going to make it easier to become a neurosurgeon. And I don't think that is the answer. And in fact, you know, we looked at the number of programs. As George said, there were a couple hundred programs when we started.
Yeah.
The number of programs has continued to rise. Now we've had a drop in 2020 because we've had a drop in everything in 2020. But what's interesting is we've had a drop in accredited programs, but we've had a big jump in what are called letter of review programs, which are if you look at the total number of programs that are available for the student, it's still gone up since 2019. So I think it's just a false idea that, as you said, Mike, we're going to start pump paramedic babies by getting rid of accreditation. I think there's no data that shows that that's at all going to be the problem. But what will happen is the national registry card won't mean as much because people will have graduated from a non-accredited school, and I, as a medical director, won't know, you know, where that was from. we're not a replica state, but there is this thing called replica, which is this, basically this idea, this improved portability.
Yeah.
Again, if you have people graduating from non-accredited schools being able to sit for the registry, how do you have portability if you don't have the same standards in the students? So I think that's the problem. And I think you're going to have students going to Ritu, Mike, and George's most excellent paramedic school. And they're not going to get the education that's required, and nobody's going to notice that. I think you run the risk of people who maybe just need warm bodies in the seats, creating a paramedic school, getting it approved by the state, and running people, trying to run people through so they can work for them and that sort of stuff too. So I just we have a national standard. We want all of our folks to meet those standards.
Ritu, just a couple things, I guess, maybe to highlight or to build on. One of those is, this whole notion, I guess, of state approval. There's not one course right now that's not approved by the state office of EMS. So
Right.
having, that to me, I guess, is a little bit of a head scratcher. Who's going to monitor this within their state office of EMS? I have a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues that are working in those offices. They turn over. There's about a third of those folks that turn over in the 50 state offices of EMS every single year. So we talk about program directors turning over. This is not the time, right? I mean, we've all seen this too over the last 2.5 years. To be in local, state, or federal service of any kind is really a tough job right now. That's a tough sell. But even take the pandemic out of this, even before then, a third of their colleagues every single year are turning over. Most of the folks, and not all of them, but most of those states don't have someone in their office of EMS that is an educator, right? And even if they are an educator, they may be one. If you look at my big state, our state training coordinator, I love him to death. He'd be the first one to tell you he's not a professional educator. And even with our gigantic state, as diverse as it is, there's no way that they could keep up with all of that. The other thing I wanted to say is, really all we have purview over is the paramedic level of coursework, right? There are 10 times, 20 times as many EMT programs as there are paramedic programs. So let me ask you this question. Where are all the EMTs then that will eventually go to paramedic school? So if there's a shortage of paramedics, why is there a shortage then of EMTs, people that want to go through the basic courses when there are as you said, a gazillion of those out there? That was a question. I don't know.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't either. But I know that accreditation is when you're looking at accreditation, it is a peer-to-peer review. Okay. It's not somebody coming in from on high and looking at your program and saying, you're really good or you're really, really bad. But these are people that do the same job that you do, right? That are they're not coming from your state. These are maybe people that you might know, but the vast majority of these people are folks that you're not going to know. And we do everything that we can possibly do to make sure that there is no bias, right? They're there to observe and report what they see based on the standards. And they're looking at things like your curriculum. They're looking at your classroom and lab setting. They're looking at your equipment. They're looking at your medical director, interviewing the medical director, the administration for the sponsor of your educational program. They're looking at your student files. They're talking to your capstone preceptors on the ambulance. They're looking at your clinical and capstone facilities. I mean, those are what accreditation is in the business of doing. It's not the police, but there are going to be sometimes things that you're going to have to fix. But it's also not it's not an all or nothing kind of proposition. Ritu, I think you can speak to that also. Really, from a board perspective, there's a lot of due process steps in here that a program, a school, is given a lot of opportunity to show improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really key. I mean, schools get visited and they may have 7, 8, 9 things that are not up to the standard, but they're given those back, and then they come back with a response as to sort of what their plan is to fix those things, and they get accredited. And then their job is to then update us, over some period of time, how that's coming along. And sometimes, as an example, like maybe it has to do with surveys of their graduates. Like one of the things they have to do is they have to get feedback from employers and
I used to get those emails all the time.
Yeah, because
I'd be like, oh God.
Yeah, but
Another one of these.
you want to know as a school that the person that leaves with the sweatshirt from your school and walks into that fire station or ambulance, that they were well prepared when they showed up there, right? So let's say they don't do that, which is one of the standards. They don't get feedback. But they'll still get accredited, and they'll say, well, we just started a new group and we're not going to have them graduate for another 10 months. So then we're like, great, 12 months. We'll want to see that you're doing this now. We're not going to make you do it next week. We need you to, same thing, about, the other things like item, and, they have to have a process for reviewing their tests, right? What is the passing score on this test? Well, it's 70%, because when I went to college, that was the passing score on every test. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you write a test of really hard questions, then maybe 40% should be passed, right? Or if you write a really easy test, then maybe 90% is passing. And they kind of have to understand those educational processes. And there are ways to do that. And the other piece too is when there's a citation, we usually tell them, this is what you need to fix. And oftentimes, here, go right here to this spot where we have the document already prepared for you to download, and this will tell you how to fix it. So the other piece about accreditation that people, I think, miss, we would love for every program to be 0 citations. One, it would make my job, like as a board member, a lot easier. But two,
Oh yeah,
the goal is for the schools to be successful and meet the accreditation standards. And George spends a lot of time on the phone with overwhelmed program directors, giving them advice as to sort of like, these are the places that we've talked to that do this really well. Maybe you should call them, or, little R&D, right? Rip off and
Yep, absolutely.
And we also, and then the CoA also puts on accreditation seminars. How many did we do last year? How many?
I think we did 6.
Yeah. Where a program director comes, spends a day, now it's virtual, and learns all, like, just how to get through how to get your program accredited. We have a conference, which you obviously have to pay for to come to the conference.
Accreditation.
But I mean, the tools are all out there. It's not a gotcha system at all. It's like a how can we help you get there system. But to be accredited, I mean, it's really not that expensive, the process. It's certainly not a money grab. You're talking about an organization that's budget is tiny compared to other folks, small staff, a lot of volunteer hours. Yeah. But meeting the accreditation requirements can have some cost to it. That is for sure.
Sure.
It costs money to teach people. Yeah. Well, if you're going to charge people money to teach them, you have a responsibility to teach them correctly and make sure they meet the standards. And the way you show them you met those standards is by showing them you're accredited.
Well, that's well said. Well, we're getting to be up against the clock here, so I want to give this last few minutes to George to give us a sort of final thoughts and maybe a little bit about where people can find out more about, CoAEMS and the process and all that kind of stuff. So take us away.
Well, first, thanks, Mike. Thanks for two. I guess first I would say go to our website. And there's a tremendous amount of resources on our website at www.coaemsp.org. You can learn everything that you need to learn about the self-study documents. They're all out there. You can see the questions that the site visitors are going to ask. It's out there. You can look, there's all different types of tools. And, Ritu talked about, the review hours that the board members have to do on stuff like this. We're trying to make this easy for everybody, right? I mean, you don't have to use these forms. There's a couple of those that we do require you to use, but for the vast majority of the stuff, this is really designed to help make your life easier, because we recognize that when I was in that role, program directors work hard. They work really, really hard, and they are often under-resourced, right? I mean, we have a lot of people that operate paramedic programs around the country that are a single-person shop. They are the program director, they're the clinical coordinator, they are the equipment manager, they are the secretary, they do everything.
Yeah.
And accreditation is not going to fix all of that, but it is going to help identify to that institution that's asking to be accredited by CAHEP, how do you meet the standards? If I go to my boss, Ritu, who's the vice president of instruction, or even the president of the college, or the fire chief, or whatever sponsoring organization you have, I can go as George, the program director, and say, hey, boss, I need this, I need this, I need this, and I need this. But oftentimes, the boss has a lot of other competing interests, right? There's other programs. I was in a health science center that had 19 specialties, and we were just one of them. We were a big one, but we were just one of them. So we couldn't always get everything that we needed. I would just say this, that two peers coming from outside of your shop telling your administration, wherever you are, hey, they need this. They're doing a great job in this area, but they could be improved if you were able to give them these resources. That carries a lot of weight. Two, you're absolutely right. The president of the college, the dean, people in academia, they absolutely understand accreditation. Maybe a little bit different for those of us in EMS, specifically like EMS city or county agencies or fire service. There's accreditation in those. Certainly hospital administrators deal with the Joint Commission primarily. That's not the only accreditor, but even hospitals are accredited. There's a reason for that, right? So there must be some value to the accreditation process. But I think, we got to work harder. We got to show what our worth is. That's incumbent upon us. But I think overall, at the end of the day, I want people to walk away understanding that I'm an EMS person just like they are. I have walked in their shoes. I have done the job. I may not be out on an ambulance right now doing it every single day, but that doesn't negate the time that I did spend in a very busy EMS system and the time that I spent in the classroom teaching. So I'm not an expert. I mean, I got stuff to learn. We have processes that we can improve on, but at the end of the day, we're on the same team. We really are. Take it back to that football analogy or two that you had when you're talking about Michigan football. We all are on the same team. And if we can help the school get better and get the resources that they need, then we are protecting the student, we're protecting the public, the people like my daughter that they're going to go out and take care of when she's in a car wreck or she has a medical emergency. Those are the people that I don't want showing up not being prepared. I want them to be prepared. You really want to know that they know what they're doing. And that's what the accreditation process is about.
I love that. That's so good. And Ritu, do you know what time it is right now?
It's 12:23.
I mean, not literally, but here it goes.
Ritu's hot medical director take.
That's right. We didn't do that the last couple.
Yeah, I mean, they're all here. I just forget or whatever. But anyway, I want your hot medical director take on this.
It's pretty straightforward. I think at the end of the day, we have fought long and hard for EMS to have a seat at the table, whether that is mobile integrated healthcare, whether that's integrating into the healthcare system as a whole, public health awareness. EMS is a key component of our healthcare system. All right. And to do that correctly, our folks need to be able to prove that they meet standards, just like all of their peers. In my so I actually happen to be in a state that requires an associate's degree to become a paramedic. And I'll be honest, there are times when a patient will be brought by and a nurse will kind of whine. They'll whine about the paramedics or something. And I'll be like, that's
Weird.
super interesting. How long did it take you to become a nurse? You know, like, it was 2 years. I got an associate's degree. I'm like, great. How long do you think that person took to become a paramedic? And they're like, I don't know, 3 months, 2 weeks. Like, no, it took them the same amount of time as you did. So for us to be able to step up to the plate and say that these highly effective practitioners of emergency care are every bit as qualified as everybody else to step up to the plate and do this care, we got to walk the walk. Can't just talk the talk. That means doing the things that all of the other professions in healthcare do. And that means national certification, national accreditation, and obviously local credentialing as the third part of that. All of those pieces together are what makes the paramedic equivalent to other healthcare professions. We all do this because we believe that, one, we want to provide the most care we can to help people in their greatest time of need. But one of the things that we all believe is that we can be the linchpin to service in a community, that we can not only provide care in an emergency, but we can improve the health of our entire community. But if we're going to step away from national standards to be able to, for some fake reason, then we are completely abrogating that responsibility and might as well just write the whole thing off. So Ritu's hot medical director take is very simple. Accreditation is important. Accreditation should still be mandatory. And just like my organization that I belong to, NAMSP, has put out there, I think it's a bad step to move away from accreditation for a national certification.
I think that's been my favorite hot medical director take so far. That was really good. Well, gosh, I don't know if there's anything. I mean, I think we did a good job. Any more final thoughts, George, at all? Or,
you know, I just got to tell Ritu that I got hair envy now that I had to cut my hair after COVID. So my hair and his hair were similar. Mine was just white.
Really?
He's got the yeah. You would have never been able to tell because it was pulled back. But I'd never had hair that long before. But the girl that cut my hair wasn't getting vaccinated, and so I wasn't going anywhere. So, and I wasn't letting Liz cut my hair. So anyway, I just couldn't do anything with it anymore. I don't know how Ritu does it, but you know,
I don't know how he does it either.
It's kind of wild now.
I look back, you get the Facebook memories or Twitter memories or whatever, and I look back, and Ritu was just so clean cut a couple of years ago. Now,
oh yeah, I saw
he's
him
just fancy free, footloose and fancy free. This guy,
he had that ponytail pulled back, and I was like, man, I remember the day not that long ago.
I always harass him about his hair, but I love you, buddy. I'm just ribbing you. You do you hair. You do you. Your hair is your strength, like Samson.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will get us out of here. On behalf of George Hatch, Executive Director of CoAEMSP, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Ritu Sani, Mike Verkest, you've been watching and listening to the EMS show. And I guess we will see you on the next episode, which will probably be recorded when I live in Texas.
Welcome to Texas, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I got a Texas guy there and an Oregon guy there, and I'm going from there to there.
And we're a Fire Dog production, too.
And we are a Fire Dog production.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we will see you on the next one. Take care.
Hey, thanks for listening to the EMS show. Let's continue this conversation. What do you say? Check out the official Facebook page and Twitter feed. The EMS show is a Fire Dog production.